I want to show you, um, before I even dig up around pull the mulch away from the base of this tree. First of all, this is November, and these were planted in this last spring, or around the middle to the end of January. And so when I saw this tree should be 4 or 5 times larger than this after summer growth. So something is holding it back. And I wanted to pull this mulch away and see if it was planted too deep. Because if I walk down here, there was another tree planted here, and it is showing some suckers at the base. So the tree died, but the suckers coming up, let's get some of the weeds away from here. The sucker coming up is coming, it's coming from the root. So it's possible that this was planted a little too deep. So I'm checking down in here to see where the roots are. Yep, yeah, it's at least, oh boy, I'm not getting roots at all. It's planted too deep. So this one, I'm not getting roots yet at all on this tree, and it's at least two inches deep. See how I can wiggle it, and I can see where the root system, well, it may have been planted the correct depth, but the soil at least came in. Either, see how that's wiggling? See, you can, if it's not staked, you can come in and wiggle it and find out where those roots are. But this is collar rot. That's what killed the top of it, and that's what provided growth from the rootstock. Now, of course, the tree is gone, but there, it's just dead. It's snapped on it, and the roots are just way too deep in here on it. And so the roots suffocated, probably Phytophthora, collar rot, hit this tree, choked it. The soil became too wet, and so the Phytophthora that's already in the soil just had a field day with the warm temperatures and the mulch and everything, and just choked it off, killed the top of it, and then the roots then suckered, or at least close to it suckered, to try to get a recovery on it, but it just couldn't make it. So anyway, I want to also, if this tree was planted too deep, then it makes me wonder about this other tree. On this one. Now, this is another, this can also be the problem. And especially if you're seeing a tree that hasn't grown all that well, if I pull the mulch away, and that's one reason why you don't want mulch against the trunk. Notice all that suckering that's coming from it? Tells me that the tree is in trouble. But it's fairly, there's the root right there. So it wasn't planted, this one wasn't planted too deep, but it still struggled. It may have been that it dried out, the roots dried out before it was planted, and it had struggled to try to recover. Whatever the reason, now it looks like, you can see it, it looks like it's going to recover. See the end of it? These were during the summer. It really struggled. But this shows us when the temperatures started to cool off, shows us these newer branches. So it will go ahead and be fine this next season if we want to keep it. What I probably would end up doing on this is just cutting it back a little bit and getting more growth. So I would come in here and probably cut it in here, there, get rid of this, get rid of some of the dead stuff in here, cut it back to strong, probably cut it back to here. Notice this is going outside, and open it up a little bit. This top looks like it's been okay, but I would still cut it back, because I know I'd probably cut it back to somewhere around here on that, maybe even a little lower, to try to get it to force out, because I know that the growth this next year on that tree will be strong. it's starting to recover. And I would probably leave in this desert here, I would probably leave those suckers this next year just to protect the trunk a little bit, unless I were to put on this white wrap or paint it with white latex paint on that, the tree wrap. If I don't do that, then these suckers can act as some protection against the sunlight and creating some damage. Notice how thin this bark is right here compared to when it gets older, when it's furrowed. I showed you on another video. Well, let's just look here. I'll pull this down and notice how this trunk has now become furrowed. A lot more protection from the sunlight as they get older. Whereas this young one over here, it's smooth, so it needs some protection for a couple of years until it gets like the other tree. That should do it. Leaving these in here. If they get too tall, get too strong, I'll just cut one of them out or cut it back just to get it to sucker a little bit more and give some shade, some protection to that very light skinned bark.